Mr. Tokumbo Obayan joins us. He's a leadership consultant, still looking at expectation for the year. Happy New Year, and good to have you join us this morning.
Happy New Year to everybody too. It's a great year.
Well, I'll pick you on that when you say it's a great year, because we started off, it's the third day of the year, and many are expecting a whole lot of magical and miraculous things, especially coming from the recession. We're still in recession, 2016, but we were trying to look at some of the key sectors with Mr. Omashaye, and in trying to look at all of that, he touched on urgency of this government and the speed with which the government handles things, and he's also talked about some other ministries and sectors where it doesn't seem as if some other things are happening. Do you share in that when you say it's a great year?
Yeah, actually, well, the reason I say it's a
because
great
it's
year,
paradoxical if you say you share in that.
Yeah, so I say it's a great year is that at the beginning of everything you have opportunities. And you can decide to look at it based on where you're coming from, in which case you get fixated by your past. But the way I look at every year is every time, and on my WhatsApp page I said, new year, new beginnings. And you know, a few years ago, about 2 years ago, I think I came on when the government was celebrating 100 days in office. And I was here on channels, and I said, and I talked about the first 90 days, the first 100 days, the beginnings. But I also said then that every time you can recalibrate. The day you recognize that you have an opportunity for a new beginning, then it's a great opportunity. So I believe that it's a great year, not because the circumstances are necessarily positive at the moment. I'll tell you honestly, we've had a government in office now going into the second year. By May 29, there'll be 2 years of the government in office. And what you end up seeing is not necessarily bad intentions. I mean, G.K. Chesterton said that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I have said that many times, even on this program, that intention is not sufficient. In fact, goodwill is not sufficient. A lot of the time, the difference between performance is, in fact, I think I said it once here, that there are two kinds of bad leaders. The first one, the malevolent, account for a small percentage. The majority of bad leaders is either misperformance, which is often built on lack of knowledge and it's ignorance. So what you've had fundamentally is just we've had problems. But I believe that as we start the year, we can recalibrate and say, okay, let's turn our problems around. Let's find out what are we doing wrong. If you keep on repeating the same thing, you expect to get the same results.
I think that's a better place for us to start off when we return, and we'll also put into perspective what form of warnings we did get in the year 2016, even from the First Lady. After now. Thank you, Linda. And before we continue on those warnings, we did say we were going to also look at, let's quickly go to Abuja, where Marco is waiting with her questions.
Well, yes, quickly, let's talk about, the followership. I know that, Mr. Wayo, you always talk about leadership, and we've talked about leadership for a great part of this program. Let's focus a little more on followership. What do you expect? What role do you see for followership in 2017?
Hello, Mark. I think it's difficult. Talking about followership and leadership are two sides of the same coin, fundamentally. To a large extent, leadership determines followership to a large extent. To some extent, followership can affect leadership, but because the numbers and the disparity and the divergence is so great, usually there is still a need for some level of responsibility that comes from the leadership. Now, our challenge in Nigeria is twofold. We have a scenario whereby, by reason of our level of development, the followership itself is very diverse, very uneducated, very uninformed, unfortunately, and to a large extent is not even aware of what makes things happen. A simple example is the issue of the ease with which Nigerians get swindled into investments that have no future. That shows you a lot of level of ignorance and inability to understand how things work. So followership, yes, we want to put a demand on followership. But I must confess that in the middle of a crisis situation, you need people to stand up and take responsibility. That's what we call leadership. I like to say, I've said it before, that leadership is not necessarily those in government. It's everybody can be a leader. But in reality, those in government have the bigger platforms of leadership. And so the only thing I would say that might be required of followership in Nigeria is that we need to all begin to take personal responsibility for where our nation is going. But the challenge you have is if those who control the levers, those who have the platforms, do not take responsibility for enabling environment, you will find out that it's a longer process for followers to be the ones to make a change. And that's where the big challenge occurs. So my expectation of followership, is basically, followership are waiting because of the diversity of our nation. They need somebody. The Nigerians are not less driven than any other people in the world. What we do not have actually is direction. And somebody has to take responsibility, and because of our size, it may not be one person. I mean, I wrote a book where I talked about high impact, and I was talking about great nations that have made impact. There has been a grouping of leadership, not one, quite a number. So when we're talking of followership, we're not just talking of the president, we're even talking of everyone across board.
But if I may come here, when you talk about having not just one leader, giving direction, isn't that what's giving room to all these dissident groups from different angles? Because they're looking for a leader, so anybody can just come up and give them a direction and they begin to run.
Exactly.
Is that what we want?
No. You see, there are two different things. Usually, I mean, when I wrote the book High Impact,